All right, so we are starting with a biggin first. We're starting with Cody Assenmacher, a 35-year-old elevator salesman from Honolulu, Hawaii, via way of Iowa. I think as we get into Cody's interview, I think it'll make sense as to why I chose to start with the Vessi tribe because Cody is a mood and a half. Very excited to find out a little bit more about him and, the island vibes in particular that he is going to bring to a very different island.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and start with Cody. When you said we'll start with the big in, that I noticed that his interview seems like it's about twice the file size of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, listen, these interviews, it's a good point actually, Rob, that I will lay out a couple of qualifiers at the beginning of all of this. So these interviews were conducted virtually over Zoom. So there were occasionally blips that happened due to connection issues. I did try to edit around that, but again, apologies if it's not the most crystal clear audio. Something is better than nothing. And yes, they very much vary in terms of length and also questions asked. So some of them end up being about 5 minutes long. In the case of Cody, to your point, it is about twice as much. But as you can see, Cody maybe fits twice as much personality than maybe your typical Survivor contestant. So yeah, these interviews might vary in length. I think that's also why it's a good idea that we bring in other things like the bios and supplementary material when the interview length is maybe a bit more variable.
Okay. And then, Mike, we like to stop down sometimes when we are going to have something that we want to interject with. Do you have a suggestion for what we should call out today?
So I know with 42, we were talking about 41 with the phrases. Should we capitulate upon the 42 or capitalize on the 42 phrases when talking about 43?
Well, that would require me to remember what they were at this
So
juncture. There
we've
was the
got
soccer.
there's
There
soccer, there
was
was
the
bunny rabbit in the mailbox,
yeah, yeah.
and then there was potatoes have skin. Of course,
Of
infamously, I have
course,
skin
of
in my
course.
potatoes.
Yes. Wow. That was all in the year 2022. Can you believe it?
That was 3 months ago that this was happening. It's again, time is a flat circle.
Yes. Okay. So, what would you like to say for Vessi?
Let's go with since this is our Taku tribe, we can go with either bunny rabbit or mailbox.
Okay. Um, I think mailbox is easier to blurt out.
Yeah, mailbox I think sounds I think mailbox sounds good. So and
Okay.
it also sounds weird enough that if we just randomly say the word mailbox, it will be sort of a cue to stop down because you never know when I'll just say bunny rabbit in my normal life.
Right. Okay. And we will try to break in sparingly that we will. This will be a 9-hour podcast if we come in with every single thought that we have, but we will, break in when we have something that needs addressing. Okay. All right. So without further ado, let's bring you what Cody had to say.
To start off, tell us about yourself. Give us your name, age, and occupation.
Aloha, my name is Cody Assenmacher. I am 35 years old, and I am a sales executive at an elevator and escalator company.
Why are you here on Survivor?
I am here to play Survivor to win $1 million. I live in Hawaii, and it's sure expensive, so I could use the money. And let's be honest, coming out here with nothing for nothing would be preposterous. I could do that in my backyard with some burgers and beers, and when the mosquitoes start to bite, I could drive home and sleep in my own bed. So my driving force is the cash prize.
What's your history with watching Survivor?
I remember when Survivor first aired and my neighbors coming to my house and insisting we change the channel to CBS and tell us to watch the show Survivor because people were chasing chickens and, it's something we could relate to coming from a small town in Iowa. And since then, I quit watching, but during the pandemic, I became a binge watcher and, watched multiple episodes. And through watching it, I was like, I have the skills to participate and win this game.
Give me one
mailbox. Okay. Mike, yeah, gone are the days when your neighbors would burst into your front door a la Cosmo Kramer and say, like, are you watching this? Turn it on.
I'm just
They're
imagining
chasing chickens.
Iowa Kramer bursting in like, you gotta say this. They're chasing chickens, Jerry. Kenny, get that Kenny Rogers roasters out of your mouth. We're talking about a different type of chicken. Who would have thought, though, that was like the commonality? You know, you and I talked about this with Maggie Morgan a couple weeks ago, and I would play out list about like the initial maybe misappropriated appeal of Survivor early on of like, oh my God, they're eating grubs, they're eating rats. You know, people find different things in Survivor. I think that's the number one reason why the show is still on to this day, has been going strong for 20 plus years. Some people like the chicken chasing. Evidently, Boston Rob didn't in his first season, but some people might.
I don't remember that being a big part of Survivor Borneo, but, you know, like maybe it's a little bit of a Mandela effect.
Yeah, I mean, it also could be that, I mean, the monitor lizards were chasing the chickens, were they not? When they devoured breakfast and lunch. Yeah, I have a feeling, Rob, I don't want to call my shot too much or like put my thumbs on the scale. I think Cody is probably going to be one of your main impressions of this season.
It's like, okay, good. I like to get our big characters. I mean, it's one of the things that I love about Survivor. I like when we get really, interesting and unusual folks playing Survivor.
And Cody, I think, is both of them. He's got a little bit of like a Zoolander tone to him as well. Like he talks a little bit like this.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see where else Cody is going to take us.
And win this game.
Give me one Survivor winner and one non-winner who you identify with the most.
The one Survivor winner, which is probably a commonly answered and maybe cliche, but is Tony. The reason being is I think Tony has the fundamentals of the game of Survivor in his strategy. And that is, 1, have fun, 2, compete, and 3, just provide. And whether it be, comic relief when times are tough, or, helping out around the fire, whatever it is. I think he holds the values of Survivor in his strategy, and clearly he's good at the game because he's done well for himself. The 2 guys that I can think of that didn't win that relatable would be, somebody like Ozzy or Malcolm. Both those guys were, similar. They were very competitive, very social, and had a lot of fun playing the game. And, that's the beauty of Survivor, that there is a safety net. Even if you fall short of that $1 million, you're going to leave with a lot of fun memories and experiences, and probably come out of the game a better person than when you came into it.
What's your favorite moment in Survivor history?
I think some of my favorite memories of Survivor are the challenges when people are eating some of the gnarly foods, whether it's an egg that has been partially grown into a chicken, or a pile of worms, or whatever it may be, because the facial reactions, the ability of some of the players to put down some food that looks nasty, I can't imagine the textures and the smell, was absolutely incredible. So those memories of people eating those things that I was getting sick just looking at from a TV perspective, I can't imagine them, standing in front of it, smelling it and tasting it. I was a huge fan of Fear Factor, and that was always in there, and I was just like, ooh. Bro, I don't know how they do it. I've eaten some gross stuff as a kid, being just the knucklehead that I am, but I don't know if I could, the strategies of it. Some people are swallowing it whole. I'm like, now it's hitting your stomach. I don't know if that's much better to have a whole worm in your stomach. The facial expressions crack me up.
Mailbox. Mike, this was his answer to what is your favorite Survivor moment?
This has to be, I think, number 300 on the list for, I'd say it's 75% of Survivor fans out there. What is your favorite Survivor moment? Quote, the challenges where they eat the gnarly foods.
22 years.
I also will say that I think we have now found a new title for that type of challenge, thanks to Cody. I know there's been a lot of discourse in the past few years of let's stop calling it the gross food challenge because these are local delicacies and it feels a little Amerocentric. Cody, I think, rebranded them into the gnarly foods challenge.
Yeah, because really you could have it both ways, where it's that's gnarly. No, it's no, gnarly good.
Exactly.
This is a delicacy.
That's the thing about island life, man. Using things like gnarly, sick, it's all about turning negatives into positives. And that's who Cody is as a person. But yeah, this tickled me to no end, much like, I guess, the feeling of swallowing an entire worm.
Yeah, that will tickle you from the inside.
I
Yeah.
also love that Cody's like, oh yeah, like when you eat, half-born chicken or like a pile of worms. I can't recall when anyone's ever had to eat a pile of worms. I don't know if that's an Iowa thing that, again, you were chasing chickens and eating piles of worms, but I can't remember that personally.
Yeah. Also, great plug for myself and Mike Bloom and Maggie Morgan. That most recently we did one of our off-season Survivor podcasts, Out Wit Out Play At List, talked about the all-time greatest Survivor food moments. A couple of those moments were from the gnarly food competitions.
Do you think if he were in the situation, he would pull a Denise and just start screaming as he shoves worms in his mouth?
Maybe. I don't know. He might be like screaming with delight. He loves it. It's his favorite moment.
Oh, gnarly! Oh, radical!
All right, let's go back to Cody.
One life experience you feel has prepared you most for the game.
On this journey, I've had the ability, I'm from Iowa and I've moved around a lot. I've had the ability and I've been blessed to have traveled and seen some places. But I think the one thing that will help me in the game of Survivor was my transition from the mainland to Hawaii. Hawaii is a unique place. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The aloha spirit and everybody
Mailbox.
and the culture is something.
Yes.
Cody just shout out the late Mikhail Gorbachev accidentally in his sentence.
In what way?
He said, it's Gorbachev. It's gorgeous.
Let me see. I didn't catch that, but
Place. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. The aloha spirit and everybody.
And we'll see if Cody tears down any walls in his gameplay between him and
he was
other
a
contestants.
fan. He was a fan.
That port wine stayed gnarly, bro.
Okay. All right. Back to Cody.
And the culture is something that is fantastic, but living in Hawaii and visiting Hawaii are two different things. And, there is a stereotype that, the locals don't necessarily like when, people come to their island and, start working there. You have to earn their trust. And moving to Hawaii put me really out of my element. I had never lived by the ocean, never been in a tropical environment, never had the cuisine that they eat there. So it threw me for a 360, and being able to adapt quickly to the change of culture, of people, of food, I think will allow me to really adapt here to the game of Survivor, because being able to relate to, I believe, anybody is very important. And that experience of moving to Hawaii did that.
Yep.
And that experience will also help me because that island lifestyle and the things I've learned in Hawaii will be helpful here in Fiji.
Mailbox. Okay, so I don't know if it's all the Hawaii talk or the facial hair or the wild shirt, but I feel like, Mike, do you get at all from Cody that if we were going to cast some sort of Survivor White Lotus, which has many different Survivor connections from Mike White to Alec Merlino, could you see Cody as being the Armand of the season?
Well, I think more so maybe the other recipient of some of Armand's play, I should say, considering how much we talked about Cody's ass tattoos.
Yes. Okay. You know what? Not gonna.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, though. Not the White Lotus, but I do completely agree. I think Cody, unfortunately, ends up missing the boat. I think if he was cast on Survivor even a couple of years earlier, I think Mike might have been like, Cody, can we do you have any availability on Tuesday from 4 to 7 to come in and be an extra? Because he absolutely has those vibes. But let's talk about the ass tattoo for a second here, because this is something that you and I debated.
For Cody A, yes.
Yeah, still a little bit in and out on. So he talks again in the Survivor 42 trailer. I live to get radical. I even have it tattooed on my butt cheek. And we really debated, okay, is it live to get radical? Is it just get radical? Further confusing thing. So we have, again, these 1-minute social media videos getting to know the contestants. Cody says there, oh, I have living tattooed on my butt cheek. So I am flummoxed as to what exactly this dude has on his
Living?
Assenmacher. Yeah, could this be like a Mad Magazine fold-in? Where, like,
I
it's
don't
printed across 2 butt cheeks? And just depending on where it configures and everything, you could have different phrases show up at any different times.
I guess so. I guess so. Trying to think of some other variables, but maybe let's just get back to what Cody has to say. Okay. All right. Here's Cody.
What excites you the most about the new era of Survivor?
Yeah, obviously, like, Survivor has changed, and change is inevitable. And embrace the change. I'm excited for the pace of play. There is no time in this fast-paced game to dwell on bad decisions. I mean, they're going to be made all the time. I'm a believer that you don't have to be right all the time. You just have to be right 51% of the time. I mean, Vegas was built on those odds. And in a game that is played this quickly, you have to be able to just play it as if one in a row. Every conversation, every tribal, every challenge, one in a row. And the speed of the game is going to be a lot of fun. And I think me coming in at 35 and looking at the rest of the competitors, I found that I'm probably in the top quartile age-wise, and I think that's going to be advantageous because in a game that comes this quick, it's important to also be level-headed. So that level-headed will allow me to sift through the bullshit and stay within my lanes and between the ditches to make the right decisions as I navigate through to the final jury.
Mailbox. Mike, so Cody raises an interesting point. He compares Survivor to being like a Vegas gambler. Like if you were going to be like a professional gambler betting on different sporting events, hey, if you're right 51% of the time, you're making money. Okay. Do you feel like that analogy holds for Survivor?
I mean, it's always been an interesting discussion point as to how much luck is involved in Survivor gameplay. And it sort of has been both weighed for and against it, I feel like, in the new era, right? With all these advantages where now there are decisions weighed behind each advantage. So it's not just like, okay, find the thing and now you have the thing. But on the other hand, there are also things that just pop up from time to time that might make it seem more luck based. I mean, certainly when it comes to like the gamification aspect of it. I mean, hell, Do or Die is pretty much a casino game, is it not?
Yeah, but I just want to make a distinction because a casino game, sure, like you play roulette, you win 51% of the time, you're making money, but I don't think that in the game of Survivor you can be right 51% of the time and have that be, because I feel like that there's so much of Survivor is you make one mistake and you're gone from the game. I mean, one mistake could be fatal. So I feel like that's sort of like a false idea of that. As long as I'm making more correct reads and decisions than I'm making bad ones, I made, 20 good decisions and 19 bad decisions. That doesn't sound like somebody who's going to win the game. Now, in just looking back to Survivor 42, I mean, Marianne did make mistakes. So I don't know. Like, I guess it's like if it's that Tony attitude of like, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes, but if I have enough hustle, I'll be able to correct the mistakes. And as long as I'm sort of like net positive, that'll win. But I'm a little nervous that I feel like that's not the way I would look at Survivor.
Yeah, it really depends, I think, on the timbre of the cast. If there is one of these more train wrecky seasons where like everyone's making mistakes, then yeah, it's very much like, okay, the person who has made the least amount of mistakes or the most positively skewed mistakes in relation to the negative mistakes will end up winning. But I do agree with you that I feel like usually it is the cleaner game overall that ends up winning. So I think it really depends. Again, I think a lot of the things that people are taking away from this cast in general is that this could be a messier cast in terms of personality. So this might be Cody's messy cast that he desires. But I agree. Let's go back to his analogy. Like, I don't know if 51% of the time on a typical Survivor season, if he is necessarily winning with this ideal of, all right, just take the shots. And as long as you hit more than half the time, then that's a winning game.
I feel like look at Omer. I feel like that those are guys that I would say they probably made like 80% of the right decisions, like maybe, higher than that. But it's one wrong decision like at the wrong time that ultimately costs you on Survivor.
Yeah. And another interesting thing that I want to bring up from his 1 minute video is he talks about, despite coming from such disparate backgrounds, right, in Iowa, Kramer, and in Hawaii, they both sort of share this commonality of being more of a small town environment that is all about, to his point, commitments and handshakes. It's this idea of like, you look someone in the eye, you shake your hand, everyone knows each other, so you have to be a man of your word. Does not necessarily sound like the Game of Thrones, and that's not to say that like you have to outright lie about everything. We'll get into somebody later on in this podcast who is like outright said they're not good at lying, and I don't think that completely sinks your chance in doing at least relatively well on Survivor. But I think if that's a lifestyle you have lived for so long, it might be really tough to break, or at least tough to break while like simultaneously justifying your own gameplay. We saw this last season with Mike, right? Mike Turner comes from this environment where he is very much like honor bound, loyalty bound, plays one of, in my opinion, one of the more duplicitous games of the season. As a result, gets to the end, sort of not having that keen awareness as to the duplicity that he was conducting about himself. Cody doesn't necessarily seem to be particularly in that mold, but I think he is coming from a similar type of environment of like, can I play and understand a dishonest game when I have been living in such honest environments my entire life?
Okay, let's go back to Cody.
Jury.
What do you think people will perceive you as?
It's going to be interesting. I think the perception of me, I came in, wearing a mullet with some lightning bolts in the side of my hair, and it may be perceived as, attention seeking or crazy, or maybe just put a big target on my back. But the reality is that's just who I am. This is Cody. This is the style that I've always had. I don't always wear lightning bolts, but on special occasions, I did it all the time when I was a kid, maybe a 4th of July or a birthday. But I think they're going to perceive me as the crazy Hawaiian. I believe they're going to, hopefully take my big energy and use it as their shield through the game. I don't want to be sitting on the back burner and get drug along. I don't want to be a middle level player. I want to be somebody completely different. And I think my personality, my big personality, will allow me to be a shield. And, my aloha spirit of kind of laid back cruise in a lot of situations will also have them underestimating me. And that underestimating they won't realize that, in the background, as I've been telling people, I got that the relationship building in the front, the wily strategization in the back. I'm hoping that my perception of the laid back, crazy Hawaiian will get them to think that I'm not a threat in this game, that I'm not a serious player, and that will project me through, again, to the final jury.
Mailbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I apologize that we keep stopping down, but like Cody is providing some really key answers here. I should mention that there is a visual that is sort of missing, but he does bring this up again in his 1 minute video when he's talking about relationship building in the front and wildly strategization, as he puts it, in the back. He is referencing his hair. He is referencing the mullet that he has.
Yes, the mullet is a metaphor. Okay, got it, everybody.
Every haircut is purposeful. Cody is thinking 4th dimensionally right now, complete with the lightning bolts. He wants to show how electric he can be in this game.
He's got the final tribal council speech written, okay? I showed you who I was on day 1. It was business in the front, party in the back.
Exactly. And now you're looking behind me, just seeing all party.
Mull it over, people.
If this guy lasts 26 days, what do you think his hair is going to look like? I feel like we've had very few mulleted players play Survivor, and I got to imagine, especially with the lightning bolts, it's going to grow in very awkwardly.
Yeah. Well, we would love to see it. Maybe is that another list? I mean, all-time greatest mullets, besides Shambo.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, like Chris Doherty, I don't think his really counted as a mullet. I think it was just more so like long hair.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is Cody's image in a nutshell. And I think to look a bit ahead as to like how I think Cody will do in the game, like I think this is a guy personally you could peg for at least merge onwards. I especially in this new era, right, where it is all about like we're starving, we don't have anything. I think Cody's going to be looked at as like a big physical aspect as well as a camp provider, considering all the amount of time that he has spent, on a very different island. And I think despite his want to become the Chaos Cody in a manner of speaking, I can see early on how, especially people are perceiving him to his point as like a bit of the Fabio nature, right? Of
Right.
like, brash, dumb young guy, or even though he is again in the top quartile, as he says,
Yeah.
age-wise, I think that that's not necessarily a reason to eyeball him early on as like, we got to get rid of this guy ASAP.
I'm really interested to see where this goes from here with the rest of this tribe, because I think this was a really interesting person to pull first for this, because I feel like, okay, that there could be people who get Cody, and then also I feel like that he also could have potential, like, who is this jackass energy, where I could see
Jack
different
Assenmacher.
people, yeah, who I could see different people really not getting along with this.
I don't know. I feel like Cody is so laid back, or at least he wants to come across it as such that, yeah, he's saying some very fun, very weird things. Again, I'm going back to Fabio. Like, I think there is this goofball energy with him, like a Seabass almost as well, if we're comparing to like a more modern day character that I think can endear yourself to people. I don't necessarily see Cody getting on anybody's nerves on this tribe unless he is really out front and like insists on being a leader, especially when it comes to the camp stuff. But again, I just think that given the vibe that I'm perceiving from Cody so far, I don't necessarily see him as that. I know he said he didn't want to be on the back burner, but I could very much see him as just like, yeah, whatever, come to me with the plan. I'll do whatever I need to do as long as it, falls into my own 51% of positive outcomes.
Okay, let's go back to Cody.
I'm trouble.
What type of player are you looking for in an alliance?
I think my number one alliance player is going to be somebody quite different than me. And I'm searching for that, because whether it's
Shouldn't be hard to find.
whether it's, things that they're interested in, personality, because that allows me to have that direct connection to a whole nother population of players that I may not or probably won't be able to get a connection with. And that will allow me to have that bridge to two different groups of contestants. And having that, essential, two paper cups, from one room to the next, understanding what's going on will be a huge advantage in navigating through the game.
How eager will you be to look for advantages in the game?
I will be very eager to look for advantages in the game. Again, this is a new era and it goes quick. And in looking at the last couple of seasons, there's more advantages now than ever. So if you don't have one, you're SOL, because the majority of the people have one, or they have two, or maybe three. So you have to be eager in this game where you're going to get left in the dust. Now, saying that, I also have to remind myself to be patient and look for the right opportunity, because there's, a big old target that's drawn on your back if you go after it immediately as well. So I am going to send it when looking for advantages, because that's the only thing I know.
Mailbox, did he say I'm going to send it?
Uh-oh, yeah. Maybe he's watching a little too much Big Brother. Yeah, can we go back for a second to his alliance question? Because I still don't really understand the metaphor, Rob. Maybe you do. I believe the quote is, having two paper cups from one room to the next, understanding what's going on will be a huge advantage in navigating the game. What is this a metaphor for? I know we talked a lot about metaphors.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much a metaphor. I think he's literally talking about like when somebody has like a cup and then the other person has another cup and there's a string, and then you can like use it as sort of like a very like a toy phone. I don't know if that works. Maybe if the string is like pulled taut enough, maybe there's like some sort of like conduction that goes through the string. But I think that is what he's referring to.
Back in Iowa, that's our tree mail. We use two cups with a string between them.
Yeah, like, hey, are you watching this? Get over here, quick.
Yeah, that's interesting, because the only image I thought of was like, if you're at a party and you're holding two cups, you're like, oh, I got to go into the next room because I got a drink for somebody, and it's an excuse to talk to people, I suppose. I don't know. That doesn't sound like a good party strategy.
Yeah. So I think that he feels like, okay, well, if I'm talking to these people and then this other person who's not like me is talking to these people, we can communicate and then be able to like have this like a line of communication between two different groups of people that we will be the only people who know what's going on.
Yeah, so we'll put a pin in that to put a string through a paper cup.
I think
'Cause
that's the
we can
first step of making that. You put a pin in it.
exactly. But I think we can maybe eyeball by the end of this, like, who is the oppositional person that Cody
Oh,
may eyeball as like,
that's
okay,
fun.
this is gonna be my number one.
Okay. All right. Back to Cody.
Hopefully I don't get caught in the act, and if I do, I succeeded at my task, and it won't come back to bite me.
What's the one thing you told yourself you wouldn't do in this game?
I told myself that I'm not going to have any regrets in this game. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm not going to be sorry for any of the decisions that I make. I'm not going to have any regrets. I'm going to full throttle this thing, pedal to the metal, ride a wheelie all the way across the park, and enjoy the ride.
What's the best advice you received before coming out to play?
I haven't competed in anything of an organized sport or activity, like a real competition, with rewards for years. And coming into this, I was starting to feel some nerves. And usually when I'm nervous, it means I'm excited and I'm ready. And talking to some of my mentors, of this and family, the common thing that really resonated with me was be yourself and have fun.
Okay.
There we
All
go.
right.
That's Cody Assenmacher.
Would love to talk to Cody's mentor also.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. So maybe a bit of insight into it is I did ask him in my interview, what celebrity or fictional character would you want to come out for a loved one's visit? Always a very fun question. He said Patrick Swayze because he not only loves the movie Point Break, but
Yeah.
quote, I have adapted the ideology that is present in that movie as part of my lifestyle.
Interesting. In what way?
I have no idea whether that means I don't know. I'm thinking of the new Point Break where they're like skydiving to go rob a bank or something.
I think that's in the original.
Is that in the original as well? But yeah, I mean,
So
talk about live free to get radical, a very Johnny Utah-like philosophy, I suppose, even though he's not from Utah.
yeah, I feel like that they also wore dead president masks.
Yeah, maybe that's
Former
maybe.
president masks. I think that some of them might have been might
So
have been living at the time of the film. Yeah.
So I do wonder what that means, right? Is Keanu Reeves one of his mentors in that regard, considering how much he loves Point Break?
I think that tracks. I think that tracks.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense. He definitely seems like the third member of Wild Stallions.
Okay. All right. So there's Cody. So, all right. That was a fun one. So good place to start. Mike, who's the next person we want to talk about?
I just want to actually quickly dote on a couple things about Cody from his bio
Okay.
before we move on here, because the
Sorry,
pet peeves are always interesting.
First person back, Mike. I'm rusty.
That's all right. Listen, we're shaking the rust off. It's a new era and all that jazz. Pet peeves. Now, this is dissected a lot in the Surviving Snyder podcast, which I believe Dalton and Brendan and Rick just did an entire podcast with Tiffany Sealing, breaking down the pet peeves of each one of these contestants. But always fun to highlight. Pet peeves for Cody: lazy people, social media addicts, and clipping nails in a public location.
Okay.
It seems like the third one's a bit of a niche. I don't know how many times I've encountered that.
Happen? Yeah.
Maybe that's more of a Hawaii thing.
Maybe. I mean, I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen anybody clipping nails in a public place.
Living in
Maybe
New
I'm
York
just
City,
lucky.
I've seen it a couple times in transit, but I will say, I certainly have not seen it a number of times to register it as a pet peeve personally. Maybe that says more about Cody than it does about society.
Mm-hmm. But if you're doing it, please stop.
Yeah, the other thing I want to peg here is why do you believe you can be the sole survivor? I know that Survivor and I were meant for each other. Just took us 20 years to realize that. My charismatic, fun-loving personality will enable me to build alliances. My experiences, profession, and living in different cities have given me wisdom ahead of my time, and I will use that to my advantage in communicating with players older than me, while my active lifestyle and youthful spirit will enable me to relate to younger players. And I think that's a good point to bring up as well as we finish off talk about Cody here. He keeps bringing up, the top quartile, but I think it is interesting that he is 35 years old. He's a bit on the older side in terms of this cast. He certainly has had, 2 states worth of life experiences. And I think from the social perspective, that is going to allow him to connect, to talk about the landscape of this tribe. He does have someone older like a NECA. And then he does have younger people like the next person we're about to speak about in Dwight that I feel like, honestly, just given Cody's general temperament, he could be able to connect and serve as the glue in between.
Yeah. He definitely has sort of the Hawaii side and the Iowa side to be able to pull from. So I definitely think that he's going to be
Hawaii in the front, Iowa in the back.
That's right. So I think he'll be somebody that's going to be very intriguing to watch here, especially at the start of the season.
Yeah, so I think maybe we can assess some of Cody's chances, to your point, once we get to know the Vesty cast more. But again, I'll sort of stake my claim in that I think Cody is going to be someone who is going to be reliable for the tribe through the pre-merge. Post-merge, he might start to step in a bit if he starts to get a bit of that big move-itis and think like, I got to catch the big wave. I got to make sure that I start doing these things. Because we've often seen, especially in something like 42, like how much that got some of these contestants in trouble. But I think at least in the first half of the game, he's going to be looked at as such a valuable resource and such just like a big old goofball that I can't really see many reasons to target him outright.